COVID is really, really important. I mean, it obviously has an effect on all of our psychological states. Uh, but then I'll say, as a sociologist and a sociologist of democracy and a student of Alexei de Tocqueville, that a key to democracy is the social fabric that exists between the rulers and the population, and our isolation, our atomization. The fact that you sit there and I sit here. I mean, it's interesting that we connect with each other, and that's another kind of promising dimension. But essentially, we're all alone, and it leads to what Tocqueville calls the despotism that democracy has to fear most, where there's just the ruler and the whole population, and very, very little in between. And as a student of totalitarianism, I see this as the social fabric of a totalitarian order. Not to say that we are experiencing totalitarianism, but that COVID has led to a social structure that is conducive to tyranny.
It's interesting that you should say this, because I agree with you, but I also, in an ironic way, I think, well, what you're saying is more true of, let's say, the center and the left than it is of the right. And this is one of the reasons why in down ballot Republicans did so well, because they're not at, like, they're out.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Yeah.
They're going to big rallies. They're knocking on doors during elections. I mean, in a sense, they are not. There's a much more robust, active, in public civil society,
embodied civil society.
Right.
I mean, yeah, like we have a virtual civil society and a virtual public, but we and Biden's campaign, and now the way he's governing, he most clearly in the convention and in the inauguration, they've been very, very creative to present alternatives that seem to do the work that embodied interaction accomplishes, but of course not quite. And he campaigned in that way too, but it's still not quite. So I think you're right that this kind of dimension of politics includes the inequality between the COVID deniers and the kind of political ideology that kind of adopts that position. It didn't have to be of the right, but and people who are kind of live in the real world and are trying to protect themselves and the general population. I mean, I think it's absolutely amazing that this is now this is an aside to democracy, but that now vaccine skeptics, belief in vaccines is now seems to have a political structure to it now, so which is incredible.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that part of what you're saying is that it's likely that COVID's effects, not just its medical effects, but its effects on what you're calling the social body, will be long-term, and some of them, I think, will be negative. There are all these stories about the resilience, of first responders and the way, medical personnel have responded. And I think that it is true that there have been many examples of real civic virtue in the face of this, and efforts to practice solidarity with masks, or in situations where people are putting themselves at risk for the sake of others. The other irony of this, because I don't really, we don't know the long-term consequences of COVID. I think probably, it's quite likely that had COVID not happened, or even had it been handled differently by Trump, he might have won re-election.
Yeah, no, I think that's true.
And
That's
so to
true.
that extent, the terrible crisis, because of how poorly it was handled, and I think, the fact that actually the Republican Party is particularly ill-equipped to handle such a crisis because it's ideologically disposed to small government, or at least in those areas where public health and public policy are essential. It was vulnerable in this national election.
Yeah.